the fuel price is still not in our control. We saw what happened in April last year. It's over a year since the conflict began, and we don't see the end of it. We have to learn to live with fuel at $80 to $100 a barrel, which means the freight rates domestically must go up.
To cater to perishable cargo and to cater to deeper penetration into India, what we need is an airplane that is smaller, as mentioned, that has the capability to fly further than the turboprop and to carry a capacity that is much lower than a 320 or a 737, which you may not be able to fill all the time. That's where we come in.
Now, unless your last mile strategies are a part of your blueprint, your cargo is going to pick up from the clusters, it's going to land at the airports, and it's going to lie there.
We were transporting close to about 100,000 or 150,000 shipments a day, while our overall business has multiplied by about 12 to 13x in the last 7 years. The total amount of air cargo that we move has only moved up by 2.5x.
In domestic, there is a lot of seasonal agri-business. You cannot add infrastructure physically for a seasonal business that would run in for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But you need to create something like a green channel in the existing infrastructure.
Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all so much for remaining here in the audience. I know it's a fag end of the day. You've got mails to catch up, you've got calls to revert to, but glad to see all of you remaining here. Probably for the very first time, at least in my memory, I have not come across a panel discussion in any forum so far that is dedicated to domestic air cargo. And the reason why we had to have this panel discussion on domestic air cargo today was, I'm not sure many of you know, but of the total pie of cargo of the 3.15 million metric tons that we handle in the country, more than 1/3 of that cargo is domestic air cargo. And that, I think, merits a lot of attention and a lot of voice that needs to be reached out to not just academia here, but also to the wider world. I will come to the context later, but I just want to put a couple of points across. To me personally, domestic cargo is more of an unsung hero. Whether it was during the pandemic, whether it was during the supply of the essentials, this was the pillar who contributed the efforts very, very silently. So in many forums, etc., you hear a lot of talk of international cargo, both inbound, both outbound, airport capacities, etc., but there hasn't been a focused discussion on domestic cargo. So the panel that we've put together here, ladies and gentlemen, is multifaceted. We have Govt. Govt is an executive director with DACAI, which is the Domestic Air Cargo Agents Association of India. We have Mr. Vasuki Prasad. For the first time, we have an aircraft manufacturer with us. Thank you, Vasuki, for joining. We have Mr. Ajit Pai. Ajit is the Chief Operating Officer of Delivery. Thank you, Ajit, for being here. Dr. Ravi Prakash Mathur from Doctor's Laboratory. And we have Mr. Kamal from Chief Officer of Spice Express. Thank you. Welcome. Now, before we started this a couple of weeks back, I had asked a couple of friends from the industry, What exactly are your challenges or your pain points that you feel need to be addressed, deliberated, discussed about? And at the end of what I could summarize, I got a couple of points that I think is apt enough for this panel to talk about. Now, to put it in context, between all of them, there's about 150 years of collective wisdom and experience on this stage. So if you have the attention and the ability to listen what you're going to get from them, I think you will go out from this panel a lot more wiser. So let's put things in a little bit of context as to what this industry is all about in domestic, and then I will build this up with some specific questions. 36% of India's cargo is domestic, 36%. So it is way above the 33 and 33 of what international inbound and outbound is. Air cargo contributes roughly between 5 and 18%. Cargo contributes between 5 and 18% of airlines' revenue. So every airline worth its salt today will focus and try to see how much of revenue they can get from cargo. This segment is scheduled to grow at about 13.5%. Again, one of the highest percentages growth among all the segments of the air cargo industry, and roughly about 1.15 to 1.25 million metric tons of domestic cargo have been handled in this past year. As a senior economic advisor spoke about the facilities that we have in the country, the airports, the dedicated air cargo terminals, etc., I'm not going to dwell on the numerous facilities that are currently existing on ground today as we speak. What we need to talk about is how these facilities are utilized and the opportunities given to us are taken care of. In my earlier conversation with members of the industry, some of the points that they brought out to me, and I'm going to just leave them open, we can come back to question them later, was the impact of fuel prices, the security policies that we have, the inventory policies, the mode shifting, the gaps in infrastructure, digitization, lack of digitization, etc. What we want to do is to see how we can have a couple of them addressed and then prepare a detailed roadmap that we can go back to the ministry and say, look, if you want to grow this business from where we are today to where we want to be, these are some of the specific challenges we have to address as a community, right? I don't want to leave it open-ended or we talk just statements and we move forward. Let's get very concrete and specific in what we want to offer. I want to start with you, Dr. Mathur. I know you prepared a Vision 2030 document, and I know that your expertise lies a lot within the pharma ecosystem. From your perspective within the pharma industry, what are the challenges you are facing for the movement of pharma within the domestic industry? And if you could break down that answer on the active and passive pharma, what would you say would be some of, let's say, the top 3 or 5 challenges you're facing, which the ecosystem here can be able to take away as something to work on? Over to you, Dr. Farmer.
Okay, thanks, Eku, for that question. It's a very, very important question, and I think it's good that you brought it up front for discussion. So I was thinking of phrasing my answer in a different way, but now, since you have brought up this point of pain areas or areas that need improvement, so I'll take this opportunity, and sorry for being so dramatic about it. I'll take this opportunity to address what none of us addressed this morning, which is the elephant in the room, and which is the customer.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we had so many speakers on the dais and all esteemed and distinguished people. I didn't hear a single word about customer being at the focus of the business. Okay, now going back to your question on air cargo being the facilitator, and please pardon me again for being so dramatic. I think air cargo, instead of being the facilitator, might actually end up being the constraint in the entire supply chain, unless we look at certain mega trends that are happening in the industry. So I think with those 2 statements, I hope I have everybody's attention
absolutely
in the forum over here. And now I'll go on to qualify why I said what I said, and I'll back it up with some of the observations that I have made during my research. And we have been talking about the 10 million tons that we hope to carry by 2030. That is the dimension on volumes. I think what we also need to look at it is from the dimension of value. We have been listening that we will be a $5 trillion economy in the years of come, but some recent studies, seem to suggest that it's going to be much, much more. By 2030, it's going to be a $7 trillion economy, and that's going to be a problem. Because of that $7 trillion economy, like you rightly mentioned, around 20% of it is exports, or 21%. The rest of it is domestic produce. Okay, and from that, 30% is going by air.
Correct.
Okay, so it not be 10 million. From that 7 trillion, 5 trillion will be what is going to move within India, and nobody is paying attention to that. Nobody is paying attention to that. So the 10 million tons that you're talking about is going to be much, much more. Now, I'll tell you why this is a problem. In spite of all the airports that we are constructing, and I'm reading that for the next 4 or 5 years, we already have a plan for adding 220 more domestic airports in the country. Okay, that's not a small number. 220 airports, which is an equivalent of 59 million square feet of airport space that we're going to create. Okay, and the amount of investment that's going in, that's around 80,000 crores. Okay, now you might say, okay, this is music to my ears. Why should I be concerned? Because we should be concerned because we are looking at only the air cargo part. We are not looking at the other major trends. And while we are happy that we'll get this cargo to handle and our business will grow, nobody's asking where this business is coming from, where this cargo is coming from, what are the growth drivers for this cargo. Now there are two ends of the spectrum. One is the supply side, and on the supply side, the problem is still easier to solve because this growth is going to be led by clusters. They are going to be manufacturing clusters, special economic zones, logistics parks, industry-related clusters. That is one part. So connecting that as a first mile is still a simpler problem to solve. Okay?
Clear.
What is the second part of the puzzle? The second part of the puzzle is where is the demand coming from? Okay? And here you have to see two more major trends. One, as we already mentioned a couple of times since morning, is going to come from e-commerce. Okay? Now, e-commerce again is just not e-commerce. There are parts to it. There is omni-channel that makes a very big part of it. There is micro-segmentation of demand. There is micro-fulfillment. Now, this demand is going to be split into two. This is going to come from mega cities, which will need a separate kind of a strategy. They're going to be Tier B and Tier C type of cities. That's going to need a different kind of a strategy. Now, unless your last mile strategies are a part of your blueprint, your cargo is going to be picked up from the clusters, it's going to land at the airports, and it's going to lie there. So you have airports becoming constraints unless air cargo companies like yours, logistics companies, you tie up all the way to your delivery at homes. Air cargo will not be a facilitator.
Got it.
So to your question of what is the pain point, the point is that we need to bring customer centricity into air freight thinking. I mean, we as manufacturers, we measure customer OTIFs. I am not aware of how many logistics companies measure their customer OTIFs. And I'm not even going to the level of e-commerce where they measure net promoter scores of their customers. I'm not going to the level of e-commerce or FMCG where they measure customer satisfaction indexes.
Got it.
So that paradigm has to shift. Unless you bring the customer into your thinking and not talk about how many tons you're adding, how many aircraft you're adding, how many airports you're adding, this is going to be a problem in 2030.
Very well put, Dr. Mathur. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think it is the big elephant in this room. We are telling solutions based on what we think are good. We are not keeping the customer in mind while tailoring solutions. I think that point is really well taken. Let me move to Ajit. Ajit, Delivery has been one of those companies that has leveraged data to an unbelievable extent today, where that's driving the company with having decision-making abilities done instantly. And I think that's a great thing. What, according to you, is the biggest advantage that you have drawn with this data churning that you do and amalgamating that into the domestic arena?
So before I come to the point on data, I think completely agree with Mr. Mathur here. I just wanted to add something to what he was saying, which will underscore what the challenge for domestic cargo is, right? I was just recollecting some of the figures from some time back. I've been fortunate enough to be part of delivery right from the beginning, so I remember the old days. When we were transporting close to about 100,000 or 150,000 shipments a day about 7 or 8 years back. The effective tonnage on air that we were actually moving, if I were to compare that to today, while our overall business has multiplied by roughly about 12 to 13x in the last 7 years, the total amount of air cargo that we move has only moved up by 2.5x. Now, why is that the case? I think the first part there is about the value of air cargo, domestic air cargo, right? It is the only mode of transport where the end-to-end time has increased in the last 10 years, not decreased. Mr. Gadkari has been crashing helping us crash the surface cargo timeline significantly. Rail, to whatever extent, is doing better today than it ever was. Air cargo is the only one where it has increased, and that is not because the planes have gotten slower. That is because we have introduced more constraints everywhere. So, if it took 1 hour or 1.5 hours for the cargo to go into an airport today, there are airports where it takes 5, and there are airports where it doesn't move for half a day. And the fact is that over a period of time, at least differentially, while in absolute terms it may have grown, differentially the value that customers ascribe to the speed has reduced because the effective end-to-end speed, other modes have caught up, right? And coming back to the second point here and to the specific point you made around technology and data, see, ultimately there is one saying that we in delivery have always been talking about, which is that as a service provider, the information on the package is more important than the package itself. Okay, if I transport an iPhone, I don't get to enjoy the benefits of an iPhone, or I don't get to enjoy the benefits of a box of pharma, right? But where the value comes from the logistics industry and from the fulfillment industry is actually in being able to provide that information on the package. And today, air remains one of those modes, surprisingly, okay, where the least amount of information is available. Not because it is not there. All of the information is there. It is not on a common platform. It is not in a manner where it can be looked at end to end. It is still sitting in siloed systems everywhere. Terminals have their systems, airlines have their systems, logistics service providers have their systems, and as a consumer, ultimately, if that visibility is not there, right, the value is lost. So you have two problems. Okay, you have a transit time problem, okay, which has not gotten better, in fact has gotten worse while others have gotten better, and you have, even more importantly, an information problem, right? Now, when you put these two things together, and when you look at all of the other developments that are happening, whether it's the number of aircraft, the number of airports, one way of looking at it is to say, look, there's something seriously wrong. The other way of looking at this is to say that if we were to put, I think the hard parts have been solved. Okay, if you did not have an airport, there was no question of even being able to get to a valuable product. But putting all of this together is now important because that is the only thing that will actually create value for the consumer. Ultimately, technology and data-driven decision making is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. The end is customer satisfaction. The end is basically the consumer getting to understand what is happening. There are ultimately only three things that matter in logistics. In any kind of logistics, you may be operating a plane, you may operate a bicycle and deliver something. The only three things that matter are A, visibility, B, efficiency, the cost at which you do it, and the third is reliability. Everything that you do, whether it's data, AI, technology, infrastructure, has to contribute ultimately to these three things. And in that sense, I think the challenge, for the air cargo industry really is, how do you bring together all of these diverse systems, all of the diverse players in the ecosystem to deliver that experience?
Perfect. Thank you, Ajit. I think you have put that extremely clear. These are challenges that are faced right across the barrier on the spectrum of things. And I think it's time that they are taken up and addressed. Let me move to Gaurav. Gaurav, you heard what has been spoken so far. You are a forwarder. You have a family business that deals with domestic business quite a bit. Apart from the issues that has been highlighted by Dr. Mathur and Mr. Ajit, what do you think, Gaurav, should be, let's say, 3 key points that we should take forward and, find a time-bound way to solve it?
First is, in domestic, there is a lot of seasonal agri-business. You cannot add infrastructure physically for a seasonal business that would run in for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. But you need to create something like a green channel in the existing infrastructure so that you cater to the seasonal business of agri-produce, as well as the cargo that flies year around is not affected with that.
Absolutely.
This is one. Second biggest thing is that we have the need for a cargo community system. Each stakeholder has their own IT platform. You need a cargo community system that talks, that enables each one to be on the same platform. The third is, we need to identify what are the emerging products and how do we cater to that
Clear.
in the next 10 years.
Perfect. Gaurav, thanks. Sharp answer. 3 takeaways that are really, really important for us to ponder on. Let me come to Mr. Kamal. Kamal, I recall in my previous life the huge amount of success SpiceJet played during the COVID period and what you contributed in not just bringing the PP kits, but the vaccine distribution, etc., moving ahead from that sphere of life, specifically focusing on the domestic arena. How has SpiceJet, now Spice Express, absorbed this challenge of going out now and growing your fleet of freighters and supporting the growth of the domestic air cargo in India? Over to you.
Thanks, Keku. Thank you, ACFI, for inviting me to this panel. I'm honored. My first in my 35 years career in Indian aviation. To come to the point what Keku has mentioned, before I come to that point, I must certainly agree with what Dr. Mathur said about customer not being the focus, and also Ajit having mentioned that where is the transparency, why is the end-to-end timeline gone worse today compared to what they saw 10 years back. From a Spice Express perspective, we of course run a dedicated fleet of freighters, Dash 800 and 700, and we have been operating at least 20% of our fleet time on domestic cargo ever since post-COVID. COVID, of course, everybody knows that we flew about 25 of our existing aircraft, converted passenger to freighters, carrying PPE kits and whatever else that was required from unheard of airports, from airports in India which didn't even have a terminal building but had a World War II runway where our plane could land to whichever else part of the country. Moving on from there, currently domestic continues to be a focus for us. We continue to make sure that from our freighter capacity, we will have 20 to 25% of our capacity dedicated to domestic cargo. We've talked in the past, we are in the process of acquiring another set of freighter aircraft very soon. I'm unable to disclose the date or the numbers at this stage, but you'll get to hear that very soon. We will continue to do that, and we do it despite the fact, and I must admit in all transparency, that when we operate freighters on international routes, be it to Southeast Asia, North Asia, Middle East, our yields are much higher. Majority of you here are involved as key stakeholders for moving international cargo, and you all know that. Domestic, unfortunately, barring a very selective category of customers which Could be e-com, which could be pharma, which could be dangerous goods, which could be agro, Gaurav mentioned. So it's not something that one can sustain. But having said that, even though we do not earn as much on operating domestic freighters, we continue to be dedicated to making sure that we do connect the length and breadth of the country with dedicated freighters. Of course, we do have 300 flights a day with belly loads of cargo which comes from some 70 different cities across, which acts as a feeder for us for freighters from point A to point B. And we do operate on a hub and spoke across the country. The challenge that we face is nothing new. You all have heard about it since the morning. I have two challenges to make sure that my airline is customer focused, of course, and is profitable. The biggest challenge that we have currently is something that's not in our hands, and that's the cost of fuel. We've worked for years along with you all know that Ajay Singh, our chairman of SpiceJet, has been at the forefront with the government to have the VAT reduced on ATF, and Honorable Minister Scindia has played probably the most stellar role in the last 15 to 20 years that I can go back in getting some 20 states out of 32 to bring the VAT down. And we are really grateful to the Minister and the Ministry of Civil Aviation for having done that. Having said all that, the fuel price is still not in our control. We saw what happened in April last year. It's over a year since the conflict began, and we don't see the end of it. We have to learn to live with fuel at $80 to $100 a barrel, which means the freight rates domestically must go up. How does that happen when we have another Honorable Minister, Nitin Gadkari, who forever is telling us to our face that stop operating 2 and 3 hour, stop operating a few 100-kilometer routes because you will not succeed, neither for passenger nor for freight, because I have made these many thousands of kilometers of highways. Very good for the country, yes. So that's not a challenge that I'm saying is beyond our control. How do we make sure that we help improve the infrastructure, not necessarily at the airports, across the value chain, end to end? And that's something we can't just palm off to say, hamare haath mein nahi hai. I'm never for it. I forever like to engage. There are some airports here, I've engaged with them. We've said we are ready to sit with you across the table, let's find solutions. I know they won't come overnight, but I think that's the infrastructure challenge that we all have talked about and we face, is something can only be addressed if all of us in earnest sit together and possibly get even some key customers. We have Dr. Mathur here who's expressed his displeasure on how it could take forever to come on the same table and see how we can arrive, and we'll all have to give in a few, and we must. And that's where my request to the fraternity is that if we have to continue operating freighters, dedicated freighters on domestic routes, we definitely need to find a solution to the challenges that I think we can control.
Thank you, Kamal. I think that's extremely well put. I was trying to make notes and I said, no, it's there already. We've been with this a long time. But good that you brought it up. Good you've expressed it, and it's time to take action on it. Ladies and gentlemen, for the very first time, we have an aircraft manufacturer on this panel. Welcome, Vasuki. Vasuki is from Embraer.
Thank you.
And I was engaging with him a little while earlier, and Vasuki is coming up, Embraer is coming up with a product that probably would be very, very favorable to our Indian industry for our cargo. Vasuki, plain and simple. Your vision for what the Indian domestic industry can do with the freighters you are proposing to bring out.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keku. Thank you to ACFI as well as Mr. Yashpal and Mr. Vipul for having me here. While the customer is different for someone like Mr. Kamal, for us, our customer would be the operator like Mr. Kamal's SpiceJet or Mr. Tushar's Blue Dart, or we'd have Pradhan Air as well. So for us, the concept of a customer is very different to us to start off with, which is why there would be a slight different viewpoint that we have out here. And thanks to Mr. Kamal, I got to hear the pain points of what would be a customer of ours should you decide to go with Embraer aircraft. And that would be the fuel costs, you have the cost of fuel, you have the sustainability challenges in the Indian domestic market, you have the yield challenges as well. So how does Embraer or its products address this situation and challenges? To start off with what Embraer is, it was a company that was started in the summer of '69. And since then, it's been producing quality airplanes from Brazil, which is a BRIC nation, which India is also part of. What India could excel in the space and beyond, Embraer excelled in the troposphere and thereabouts. So now the airplane that we're talking about, and Embraer has excelled in this, in making airplanes up to 150 seats. And once the pandemic hit, we just realized that there was a potential and an untapped potential for a cargo capacity that was beyond turboprop in both range as well as capacity, and below the narrow body in capacity. So if you look at it, we are in the 110 meter cube space and about 12 to 13 tons cargo tonnage. When we are looking at fuel as a big challenge, you have the Embraer 190 freighters, which are the passenger converted, and we have about 500 plus of them in the world flying. And now they're coming off their first lease of life, and they have a great opportunity into becoming passenger converted freighters. And before I proceed further, I must tell you that while the two most popular aircraft families in the world would be the Boeing 737 family and the A320 family, what most don't know is the third most popular aircraft family in the world is the Embraer E-Jet family of aircraft. And because of this huge feedstock, and now we have a new generation of airplanes, we have these freighters coming in. Now, these aircraft, which have a tonnage that is a lot less than the 737-800s or the 737-700s, they come with a fuel cost per trip of 23% lower than the 320 or the 737. Wow. And if you look at the overall costs as well, they do come in that range, in the 23, 22, 20% lower. So on one hand, you have lower operating costs, which means you can operate to sectors and on markets where you may have the risk and the sustainability challenges of not being able to fill up your aircraft. And when you do not have the pressure to fill up your aircraft, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because the air cargo industry is new both to the company and to me, you'll have a lot lesser pressure to drop fares or to drop yields. Fares would be the wrong word, to drop yields to fill up your aircraft. But beyond that, it goes to Dr. Sudhanshu's vision, which he talked about perishable air cargo. And to cater to perishable cargo and to cater to deeper penetration into India, what we need is an airplane that is smaller, as mentioned, that has the capability to fly further than the turboprop and to carry a capacity that is much lower than a 320 or a 737, which you may not be able to fill all the time. That's where we come in. That's where we believe we can come in. And what is lacking is an awareness about a product range that today is new and can fill a gap that doesn't exist in the market today to help provide more solutions. We're only a tool provider. We provide a tool. We don't dictate the market. We don't tell the market what has to be done. So in case there is a need to further penetrate the market, open up new potentials and new sectors, that's where we believe with our aircraft, which is in the middle of the market between the turboprop and the 320 737, that's where we plug in.
Awesome, Vasuki. I think at least I've learned today about what Embraer can bring into the cargo fraternity. My apologies, never heard or never thought that Embraer can bring in such a big role. So excellent. Thank you so much. Back to you, Dr. Mathur. Let's pin you down a little more. I like to make life difficult sometimes. Specifically on pharma, what would be a point that you would like to have a change, which is a very low-hanging fruit, and for some reason it's not being done? Anything specific that's coming to your mind that says, look, this is something that can be done 5 years ago. Why isn't that being done today?
So the answer is not specific to pharma, and I think it applies to everyone, and that is, we're talking about transit time, how quickly you're able to turn around your shipments. And I agree with what Ajit said. Why is it that in spite of all the investments that are happening, with all the resources that are coming in, your transit time is actually going up? And what Gaurav said, it is seasonal, creating an asset for something which is going to be there with you for only 2 months, and then for the balance part of the year, you're not going to be looking at those assets, using those assets. So my point is, sometimes, not always, sometimes adding more resources to a problem, to solve a problem, can act like adding fuel to a fire. Okay, so while we are solving the problem of infrastructure, which we definitely have to do in the country, unless we are also looking at the softer aspects, of how the cargo is getting, we know these are multiple segments, how it is getting connected. And I think Vipin was asking a question in the afternoon, how I don't see how this 10 trillion tons is going to move and what is the roadmap for it. And I think the answer to that question, and the one that you asked right now, is in creating a system of autonomous logistics. So this autonomous logistics is not going to help not just farmers, it's going to help everyone. And which brings me to the point that I made earlier, that you need to connect the last mile. Now there are so many activities in logistics planning itself, like creating delivery schedules, like planning, like capacity booking, documentation. Unless you move from a very high touch system, which is right now, you have so many people which are working, so many times your plans are getting created, so many times your plans are getting reworked. Every time somebody touches a plan, somebody touches to execute something, that's adding to the lead time. That's adding to the wastage. So you need to move from a very high touch logistics system to a zero touch logistics system. That is what I mean by being in an autonomous logistics system. And you need to have we have heard of autonomous cars, right? So there are cars that can drive on their own. But over there again, there is a concept of the degree of autonomy.
Correct.
So there is something which is not autonomous at all, which we drive. Then there is something which is limited autonomy. Then there is partial autonomy, which means that, okay, the car will be autonomous driving, but somebody has to come and touch the steering wheel once in a while to tell the machine that the driver is also there in case somebody needs to intervene. Then there is a conditional autonomy. It will be autonomous as long as it is within that condition, and there will be high autonomy. So the roadmap that we're talking about, from 3 million tons to 10 million tons, has to be a roadmap where we move from a very high touch logistics to an autonomous logistics. So that has to be a part of the design. And once we solve that and move to autonomous logistics, then hopefully maybe that we solve the problem of lead times not increasing and not having to add more infrastructure.
Brilliantly put, Dr. Mathur. And I keep saying this in many forums. I think the future of our business is beyond the airport. Exactly. It's not going to be constrained to the airport. For those of us who are looking at what the next 3 to 5 years are going to be, trust me, the future is out of the airport. That's exactly also the question that I want to ask Ajit. In your specified segment and keeping data or big data in mind, where do you see the e-commerce as an industry moving towards in, let's say, the 3 to 5 year horizon? Or if you have some information that is even beyond the 3 to 5 year horizon, just a brief glimpse. I know there's no crystal ball in front of you, but given your experience of what you've done so far, 3 to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, any numbers on your mind?
No, I think the beauty about making predictions is that nobody holds you to it, right? So I might as well make one. But let's put it this way. I think the trends are fairly clear. Okay, what numbers and where do they end up is a question of, there are too many variables to it. But what are the trends, right? People are going to consume more on e-commerce. I think that's pretty clear. That's happening. And e-commerce, as we knew maybe 5 years back or 7 years back, was basically somebody going to Amazon or Flipkart and placing an order. That is no longer what e-commerce is about, right? ONDC has come in, which basically means that one form of an e-commerce transaction could be possibly you sitting in your home and ordering from the store down below through systems which neither, not through monolithic systems, not through a website, but through some kind of an interface where you may not really exactly know how the order is going to that guy, but he's fulfilling that order, right? So I think the overall sort of thrust in terms of e-commerce, I think what is happening is it is becoming more disaggregated, right? Which is good in a way, because I think what happens with that is that the positive of it is that a much larger set of people will participate, taking up consumption, taking the market, growth much higher. The challenge, right, is that all of these disaggregated systems have to still come together to deliver a consumer experience which is actually superior to what it is now. So you have monolithic systems which are designed to provide a certain consumer experience, and the challenge is that disaggregated systems have to provide a superior customer experience, right? And that is where both the challenge and the opportunity is. I think from From an e-commerce standpoint at least, I think what is happening is a few trends like disaggregated fulfillment, more local fulfillment will continue to accelerate, right? But that said, there will always be a huge amount of things which will move between cities, which will have to move to micro fulfillment centers. For example, if you have more micro fulfillment centers, that doesn't mean that the need for logistics goes down, because things have to move into the micro fulfillment center, right? So increasingly what you will find, or if you were to put a crystal ball and say, what is the future, right? Like, I think there isn't anything called e-commerce, there isn't anything called retail commerce, there isn't anything called wholesale commerce or cargo, okay? They are all converging. Okay, so if you have, let us say, if you are selling 100 iPhones tomorrow, okay, if today you sell 90 of them in a store, 10 of them are ordered online by somebody, tomorrow this may look very different. The same 100, okay, may actually be moving in different ways back to the same consumer. So maybe 20 of them will move through micro fulfillment centers to the consumer, okay. 30 of them will move to a retail store, but will be sold online to a consumer, not by somebody walking in, right? And all of these, I think that's where the future of commerce and consumption lies. So instead of looking at it as e-commerce, I would say, where is commerce going? Where is consumption going, right? And omni-channel is exactly that, right? And even within omni-channel, see, traditionally, 5 years back when people said omni-channel, the extent of imagination was ki, theek hai, matlab, I place an order with Shopper Stop, and instead of it coming from some warehouse, it will come from the store close by, right? Now it may not even be that. Shopper Stop may have a dark store somewhere, right next to where I live, okay? And 3 items may come from there, 2 may come from, the store which is 10 kilometers apart, another 2 may come from the warehouse in Bangalore. And there will be a challenge in terms of how all of this information is presented, how all of this comes to me, right? And gives me an experience which is better than what it was when I used to walk into the store and buy it myself, right? And that's really where I think the trends are. We've spoken about specifically on cargo also, and like I said, I don't think there's an issue about growth. Okay, I think the tailwind in the market is so large today in India, especially on domestic consumption. And look at, basically, I think India is approaching that curve in terms of per capita income, where suddenly you will start seeing disposable income shooting up and hence discretionary consumption shooting up. The challenge though is, how do you then meet the expectations of the consumer, right? Because the consumer no longer, the consumer's expectation changes every few months, and it is only upgrading, right? Every minute. And when you put those two things together, okay, as service providers, as an industry in service of the consumer, right, how do we sort of gear up for that, okay? That will define how much of the growth will come into which part of the industry, okay?
Got it.
I don't think one can prevent the consumer from moving ahead, okay? The only possibility is that we get left behind, okay? And that is what we need to protect against.
Very true. Thank you. Thank you, Ajit.
And hence, sorry to interrupt.
Please.
The point I was making on autonomous. You mentioned Amazon. You don't have a customer helpline number for Amazon. You just experience it seamlessly because it is autonomous.
That's technology. Gaurav, I'm going to throw the crystal ball back at you. Courier's done, automotive spares done, e-commerce done, pharma done. What next? Give me a product that is going to be the next big product in the domestic air cargo industry.
So, one of the big thing that is coming, in fact, you have pharma and allied healthcare related things, and second is agri-produce.
And that's the two that you think are going to drive domestic demand in the next years.
These two have a huge potential to drive the domestic demand.
Excellent. Good. You see anything else coming up on that? Is flowers going to be a commodity? This morning, I think we were seeing some numbers. I think Glenn put up some numbers on what flowers are doing in the Colombian market and in the Kenyan market. Flowers will be a next commodity, do you think? I know there's a huge pent-up demand of flowers, especially during the wedding seasons and Mother's Day, Wife's Day, Girlfriend's Day, etc. But are we going to see something move more in the flower market in the country?
So, we have seen some chunk of flower movements in India, but on the domestic air cargo front, it is not that huge. maybe a untapped potential to churn it from other modes of transport into air.
Perfect. Thank you. Kamalji, you operate. Okay, so you wanted to make a point on this.
Yeah,
do that and then
yeah,
I come
yeah.
to your question.
So I did not talk about the technology bit that we are adopting at Spice Express, and I'd like to share that. We have a model which is called FaaS, which is Fulfillment as a Service. And this is a tech platform that has been developed in-house by SpiceJet's subsidiary called Spice Tech. In fact, we have about 80 data scientists on our payroll stationed in different parts of the country. And what they've developed for Spice Express, and this is in-house for us as a group company of SpiceJet, is a technical platform which works that you need to send either 10 kgs or 2 tons of whatever from Michigan to Amritsar. You get onto a platform and there are filters. Do you want it in 7 days? Do you want it in 3 days? We've not rolled it out because we are still connecting with a lot of potential partners who we have to sign up, but we've done a lot of API integration with a lot of partners. We intend doing that, and we are very ambitious to do it with customs of countries. I'm very ambitious, so that it becomes seamless. We've done it with a lot of stakeholders in the value chain. A lot of challenges exist. One of them I've just named, border control. There are a few which will need complete rethinking. And this platform from, say, US to Australia need not be via India on Spice Express. It will be airline agnostic. And that's what we are working on. It's about 12 to 18 months away, and I keep my fingers crossed. So that's what comes. And talking of autonomous, that's what we aim to do internally. I thought I must talk about this since you talked about it, and Ajit talked about the fact that you need. And this will also give you real-time transparency of where your consignment is, at what stage you can actually. And talking about 3 tons to 10 tons is a huge debate. And I personally don't have any doubts. We may even cross 10 tons. 10 tons may sound very big. Why I say that is, if I go back to 2012-13, if I'm not mistaken, India had only under 200 commercial aircraft. Vasuki, you are a numbers man, correct me if I'm wrong. And at that time, when SpiceJet placed an order for 155 Boeing MAX aircraft, Indigo placed an order for first 100 and the next 130. And when I used to sit with AAI and a lot of other airports, they would say, "Tum jahaz la rahe ho, park kahan karoge?" And my standard reply used to be, when the aircrafts land, we'll find a way to park them. Today there are 780 aircraft. Every aircraft is parked in some city or the other. So the same logic, 3 tons to 10 tons and maybe more than 10 tons will happen. The difference, however, and that's what I want to emphasize, is because passengers speak and aircrafts will still turn around in 30 minutes, because otherwise the passenger will tweet and tell the whole world you're 5 minutes late. Cargo, doesn't speak. That's where we have to speak for cargo. And that's where I said we need a very strong stakeholder meetings, interactions with every stakeholder, right from the customer till the other end, including the government agencies and what have you. And that's what we really need to do, and we must start now.
Vasuki, I have to ask you a question which is a little difficult for you to answer, but let me put it across to you. When is the first freighter coming to India?
It's in the hands of Mr. Tushar or the gentleman from Pradhan Air or Mr. Kamal out here, so it's all in their hands and decisions on when the first one's going to come into India.
That's a good salesman talk. Well done. Well done. So you guys here have to place orders with them. We can do that after this panel gets over. They can come up to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we finished some of the questions that I thought we had to put specifically. I have 2 options to move forward from here. One option, I open this forum for Q&A, or one, we do a rapid fire with these gentlemen. What do you think we should do? Rapid fire? Who's going first? Kamalji. Done? Straight answers.
From
What's
the heart.
over you want? From the heart.
Right.
One inspirational leader.
Narayan Murthy.
Sports or music?
Music.
Next life in the airlines or outside?
Definitely airlines.
Your stress relieving zone, family or yoga?
Both.
Nah, pick one.
Both.
Pick one.
The third time, both.
Okay, I'll leave that to you. Okay, Dr. Mathur, Bollywood or Hollywood?
Bollywood anyway, any day.
One advice to your younger self,
Take more risks.
OTT versus theatre.
OTT.
OTT,
OTT.
excellent. Beaches versus mountains.
Yeah, that's a tough one, yeah. So, going to the mountains is
Don't
tough.
think.
Beaches.
Not an option to think.
Beaches.
Beaches, perfect. Let me move to least favorite subject in school.
Biology.
Biology. Excellent. Road transport in India, threat or opportunity?
Huge opportunity.
Huge opportunity. Okay. And one more for you is rail transport. Threat or opportunity?
Not.
Don't think.
I think can be an opportunity, but sorry, not.
No?
Yeah.
Okay,
not
I'll take that. Let's go to Vasuki. First thought in the morning.
Sorry?
First thought in the morning.
How do I sell more planes?
Super. Awesome. Very good. One hobby that you will pursue when you retire. I know it's a couple of decades away, but one hobby that you will pursue.
Getting my PPL and flying about.
Very good. I have to pick one from the others. Again, your stress relieving zone, family or yoga?
Yoga, not family.
No family. Okay. That's the difference. Well done. And again, sports or music to relax?
Music.
Music. Perfect. Okay. Gaurav,
Yes.
tough ones or easy ones? Which one do you want?
How we want.
Both. Lovely. Biryani or pizza? And it's not because you look this way, so excuse me. It's just on my list. I don't know how it came here, but
Pizza.
on my list.
Pizza.
Pizza. Lovely. Are you a cricket fan?
No.
No. I had a question here, Virat Kohli versus Dhoni, and my son told me yesterday, no, don't ask this question. There's some controversy going on. But if I were to ask you, it would be?
Kohli.
Dhoni. Kohli. Okay, good. Your least favorite subject in school?
Math.
Math. You are in a good industry for that. Excellent. Okay. I have the clock showing me, I'm past time, etc. Where's Satish? He's not going to shoot me, right?
So let me ask you rapid fire now.
I'm the question
No,
guy.
you have to
I'm
do
not
a
the
rapid
answer
fire
guy.
because you did a rapid fire, so give me a chance. Is it dosa or parota?
Any day dosa. I come from Chennai.
Want to be an airline or a forwarder in your next Karjanma?
Why did I start this? Why did I start this?
I had to grill you somewhere because if you thought putting rapid fire on my panel is
Airline.
Delhi or Bombay?
Any day Delhi.
Okay, thank you. But a big round of applause for a domestic cargo session in the evening. It couldn't have been better than this. Keku, for next conference, you're selected as a moderator again, so mark your seat now.
I have to just say one thing. I have not heard one pin drop silence in the many sessions I've moderated over the years. Big kudos to all of you for the pin drop silence. Either you were on your mobiles or you were paying a hell of a lot of attention. So kudos to you.
Keku, the president has said you can permit one question.
Okay, I think so. We have airline, we have shipper, we have delivery, we have aircraft, and we have agent. How domestic cargo can become a professional cargo? Today, the domestic cargo and international cargo, both what we operate, both behave and work in a different way. As a terminal operator and as an airline, both these are so distinct, and how we can well behave and make these things futuristic. Because we have a cargo coming in after ready for carriage. If SpiceJet is given a lower rate, change from Vistara to SpiceJet. Keku, you heard me. Both you standing here, right? Okay? And all of you guys doing that, right? Let's not say that, but I think so we need to change if you want to grow this cargo. You're asking information not coming in. How can information come in the last minute? 30 minutes before the flight, you change your partner. That's one. Secondly, in terms of the packaging or the way the cargo come at the terminal, there's complete difference what comes from EXIM and what comes from domestic. Are we going to standardize that? Number 3, in terms of declaration for security, which is very, very important, and especially e-commerce. There is nobody understand what is lithium battery, any of the customer, right? And the way it comes, the dangerous cargo, it's danger for the airline, for the aircraft, for the passenger. And to be very frank, every time I sit on your aircraft, sir, and I look out, and I said, Bhagwan ko pratna karo, So I think that's the stage what we are in, as far as domestic cargo. And Keiko, I think so we need to bring this reality on the table without being nice to each other. This is a real problem what we have. And that's why the cargo, what you say, is taking more time. That's why the second my observation in terms of to you, what you said, why this is delayed and this is fast. Because the ecosystem, you are still living on the Octroi Naka and Czech Naka regime. Your warehouses are away from the city, and the airports are within the city. So typically, you bring cargo from Patodi or wherever into the airport, 2.5 hours. You have a flight to go to Mumbai, which is 2.5 hours. You go from Santa Cruz to Bhiwandi, another 2.5 hours. Because the ecosystem, which is coming in a way where the road has become more efficient. And I don't want to go into ATF and cost, forget about that. But our consignment value is also so low. That's why people are not preferring air cargo. And nowhere in the world, $5 a kilo, you can move on surface.
So I don't think that's the argument. I don't think air cargo has to be competitive to surface cargo in terms of cost. I think that's clear, right? I think the question is basically what is the incremental value, right, versus what are you delivering for that, right? And so far as the issues that you raised are concerned, yes, some of them are clearly problems. They need a solution. But also, I think the reality is that solutions emerge, or many of these solutions, a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? Investment in better packaging will go in when air cargo becomes more central to the supply chain. Today, it is not as central to the supply chain, right? And again, in terms of, you spoke about the fact that things have to come from outside the city. Yes, that's true. Warehouses will be outside the city, but at the same time, what ultimately matters is the end-to-end transit, which means that if there is a way of actually storing at a higher cost, okay, but being able to deliver much faster, when you put together the cost of inventory and the cost of transportation, it may still work out to store more expensively, to have facilities within the city, if not for everything, for at least the higher value cargo. The problem today, right, is that even if one were to solve all of these issues, and each of these is solvable, does that necessarily result in a better experience, right? Let me come to the whole security problem that you raised, right? You're absolutely right that there would be shippers, for example, who do not have the right security infrastructure in place. But if somebody is willing to invest in it, there's no advantage that they get. Today at delivery, for example, we have, outside of maybe the terminals, we have the maximum number of X-ray machines in the country. We scan each and every piece of cargo that comes into our network. But I am still subject to the same regime where my trucks go wait outside the terminal, the X-ray machines are full, so they have to go back or they get offloaded, and because there is other things coming in which is not subject to the same standard, we are all being bunched together. So there is no opportunity to create a difference, right? So I think I think you're absolutely right. We have to sit across the table and solve these problems, right? But the problem is a real one, and it is a chicken and egg problem till we are able to sort of take a leap forward and say that this is the incremental value we will deliver. Nobody will pay for it. You can demand that price. You can only demand that price when you give the service, right? And how to get there is a journey. That's a fact. I don't think any of us individually can do something to fix it. I think all of us have to sit across the table, fix our respective parts of the problem, keep the bad actors out, right? There is a problem of bad actors, but there is a problem of bad actors in every industry. right? The RBI, if the RBI were to make rules, right, assuming that basically all of the bad actors and the good guys will all act, in the same manner, okay, then there is no real incentive for anybody to invest. There is no real incentive for anybody to act in the right manner, right? So I think it is a multifaceted problem. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you are an absolute legend of the domestic cargo industry, and you've probably seen this through different eras. But I think we need to take a pause and reflect is to say that, and I will go back to the same statement, which is that a consumer's expectations will be met somehow, right? If not by one industry, there will be some other industry which will do it. If it is not by something flying for 24 hours, if Mr. Mathur wants to deliver something, he will figure out how to put a warehouse there and figure out how to move it, in that manner so that the consumer gets it at the time he wants. Now it is up to us to figure out how do we come together to get to a solution, right? I think that's really what I think the solution is.
Satish, over to you.
Thank you, Kiku. May I request Cyrus to come on the stage? One, we would like to thank Delivery for being a track sponsor. So, to Kamal. Dr. Ravi Prakash Mathur. Ajit Pai. Vasuki Prasad. Gaurav as well. I don't get it. Thank you very much for that session, but I think they truly deserve once more a big round of applause. Thank you so much.